My younger sister betrayed me with my boyfriend and got pregnant. Years later, my dad died and left me his entire inheritance. But what my ex did when he found out landed him 18 months in prison. I'm 24 years old. I work in digital marketing. And honestly, I need to tell this story because what happened with my family basically destroyed me in a way I never thought was possible. The thing is, I always thought my sister Scarlett and I were close. You know, we weren't super best friends, but we weren't enemies either. Like a normal sister relationship with 2 years difference. We had our younger sister Ava too. She's 11 now, and she's the only one who really has nothing to do with this whole mess. I guess I should start from the beginning. When I met Tyler. It was like 3 years ago, at a networking event for my job, and honestly I liked him right away. He was attentive, funny, seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say, and after a few months of officially dating, I decided it was time to introduce him to my family. We'd been together for about a year at that point, and things were going well. I mean, we had our issues like any couple, but nothing serious. My mom was always very traditional, one of those people who believes appearance is everything and that women should look a certain way and act a certain way. And honestly, Scarlett was always her favorite because she was more like her in that sense. Always put together, always smiling, always perfect on the outside. So anyway, I brought Tyler to a family dinner one Friday night. My dad was there. My mom, obviously. Scarlett, who was like 20 at the time, and little Ava. Dinner was normal, you know. My parents asked the typical awkward questions about his job and his intentions and all that, and Tyler handled everything super well. What I didn't notice at that moment, because why would I, was how Scarlett was looking at him. I didn't see it because I trusted her, I trusted him, and it would never have occurred to me that something could happen between them. The following weeks, Tyler started being busier. Or so he said. He'd cancel plans, show up late, always had some excuse about work or traffic or whatever. I believed him because I had no reason not to. But something felt weird. You know what I mean? It was like that feeling in your stomach that tells you something's not right, but you can't identify exactly what it is. One night, I think it was a Tuesday, because I remember I was supposed to see him after my yoga class. He came to my apartment and left his phone on the table while he went to the bathroom. I'm not one of those people who checks their partner's phones. Honestly, I'd never done it. But his screen lit up with a message and I caught sight of Scarlett's name. My first thought was like, okay, maybe it's something innocent. Maybe they're planning a surprise for my birthday or something. But something made me pick up the phone and open the conversation, and what I saw basically broke me in two. They were super flirty messages, sexual innuendos, emojis you definitely shouldn't be sending your sister's boyfriend. I started scrolling up and there were weeks of messages. Literally, weeks. I don't know how to describe what I felt in that moment. It was like the floor had opened up beneath me. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. When Tyler came out of the bathroom, he saw me with his phone in my hand and the look on his face confirmed everything. He tried to explain himself, told me it didn't mean anything, that they'd only been messages, that nothing physical had ever happened. But I'm not stupid. The messages clearly implied something had already happened. I told him to leave. I think I screamed it more than said it. And he kept insisting we could work it out. That it had been a mistake. A mistake. Can you believe it? Like sleeping with my younger sister was the kind of mistake like, oops, I spilled my coffee. That same night, like at 11 at night, I drove to my parents' house. I hadn't told them I was coming. I just showed up and knocked on the door until my dad opened it half asleep asking what was wrong. I went straight to Scarlett's room and woke her up. I confronted her right there in front of my parents, who had come upstairs behind me asking what the hell was going on. Scarlett tried to deny it at first. But when I showed her the screenshots I'd taken from Tyler's phone, her face fell. My mom was standing there in shock, and my dad, who was normally the calm one in the family, got furious with Scarlett. They told her she had to leave the house, that what she'd done was unforgivable. I remember Scarlett was crying and saying she was sorry over and over, that it had been a mistake, that she didn't know what had happened to her. I left that night without saying another word to her. I couldn't even look at her. The following weeks were horrible. I blocked Tyler from everything, blocked Scarlett too, and only kept in contact with my dad and Ava. My mom would call me occasionally trying to be a mediator, but I didn't want to know anything. Then, like a month after all this, my cousin called me. We kept in close contact, and she still went to my parents' house often, so she kept me up to date on what was happening. She told me she had to tell me something and that I wasn't going to like it. Basically, Scarlett had announced at a family dinner that she was pregnant. With Tyler's baby. 3 months pregnant. I did the math mentally and realized that meant she'd gotten pregnant when he and I were still together. Probably right after I'd introduced him to my family. I don't know if you've ever felt that kind of betrayal. It's like physically painful. I stayed like 2 days unable to eat, just lying in my bed processing everything. The worst part is that according to my cousin, my parents had softened toward Scarlett because now she was going to be a mother and needed support. My mom especially was on her side again, helping her with doctor's appointments and buying things for the baby. It was like I was the one who had done something wrong for not forgiving her immediately. Months passed, and Scarlett and Tyler got married. It was a small wedding because obviously I wasn't going to go, and I guess it was awkward to explain why the older sister wasn't there. My cousin told me later that my parents had made up some excuse about me being on a work trip or something. They'd lied to all the guests about why I didn't go. That hurt as much as everything else. The fact that they'd rather lie and protect Scarlett's image than acknowledge what had really happened. I kept in contact with Ava because she had nothing to do with any of this, and I adore her. Sometimes we'd see each other secretly, like I'd pick her up after school and take her for ice cream or to the movies. She'd ask me why I didn't come to the house anymore, and I'd tell her I'd had a disagreement with Scarlett, but it wasn't her fault, and I still loved her very much. It was a horrible situation because Ava didn't fully understand what had happened. She was too young, but I didn't want her to feel like I was abandoning her. Things continued like that for about 2 years. I went on with my life. I met some people, dated a couple of guys, but nothing serious because honestly, I was still processing all the shit that had happened. I'd talk to my dad occasionally on the phone. Short conversations where he'd ask me how I was and I'd tell him fine, and he'd tell me he missed me. We never talked about Scarlett or the situation. It was like there was this giant elephant in the room that we both ignored. And then one Thursday morning, I was at my office when I got a call from my mom. We hadn't talked in months, literally months. So when I saw her name on the screen, I knew something bad had happened. I answered and she didn't even greet me properly. She just said, "Your dad died this morning." Just like that. No preamble. Nothing. I froze. I couldn't process what I'd just heard. I asked her what had happened and she told me he'd had a heart attack in the early morning, that he'd arrived dead at the hospital. What broke my heart, later, when I went to the house that afternoon, was finding out that my dad had been sick. He'd had heart problems for like 6 months, had been going to cardiologists, taking medications, and nobody had told me anything. Nobody. My mom said my dad hadn't wanted to worry me, that he'd said I already had enough on my plate. But I knew the truth. I knew they'd probably all decided together not to tell me so they wouldn't have to deal with me, so they wouldn't have to acknowledge I was still part of the family. The funeral was horrible. Scarlett was there with Tyler and their son, who was already like a year and a half old, and I tried to stay as far away from them as possible. Some aunts and uncles asked me why I hadn't gone to Scarlett's wedding, why I didn't go to family gatherings anymore, and I didn't know what to tell them. Should I tell them the truth? Should I tell them my sister had slept with my boyfriend? In the end, I'd just say we'd had differences and leave it at that. About a week after the funeral, my dad's lawyer called all of us in for the reading of the will. We met at his office. There was my mom, Scarlett, Tyler, Ava, and me. The lawyer opened the will and started reading. The thing is, my dad had been very specific with the distribution. He left me 40% of everything, including his share of the family home that was technically in both his and my mom's names. He left Ava 30%, with the money put in a trust until she turned 18. He left my mom 20%, and he left Scarlett 10%. Scarlett's face when the lawyer finished reading was total shock. Tyler looked furious. My mom was quiet, but I could see she was upset. The lawyer then handed me an envelope. Told me my dad had left specific instructions that only I could open and read it. I put it in my purse without opening it there. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry or get emotional or whatever was inside. We left the office and Scarlett caught up with me in the parking lot. She told me we needed to talk. That what Dad had done wasn't fair. That she had a son to support. And that I should share my portion of the inheritance with her. Tyler was there behind her, arms crossed, looking at me like I was the villain of the story. I told her no. That Dad had decided how to distribute his things, and I was going to respect his wishes. Scarlett started crying. Told me I'd always been Dad's favorite daughter. That it had never been fair. That she deserved more. I told her. And I remember perfectly what I told her because I'd thought about it 1,000 times. I told her that maybe if she hadn't fucked my boyfriend, things would be different. Tyler stepped forward at that moment and told me to calm down, not to talk to his wife like that. I told him to get away from me, that I had absolutely nothing to say to him, and I got in my car and left. That night in my apartment, I opened the envelope. My dad had left me. It was a letter, handwritten, and basically he was apologizing for not supporting me more when everything happened with Scarlett and Tyler. He told me he'd always known what she'd done was wrong, that he'd tried to convince my mom to take a firmer stance, but she'd always been very protective of Scarlett. He told me he was leaving me the largest portion of the inheritance because he knew I'd use it wisely, that Ava would have hers when she was older, and that he hoped someday I could forgive Scarlett, but that he understood if I couldn't. I cried like I hadn't cried in years reading that letter. Things got worse after that. Tyler started sending me messages asking me to reconsider, to think about his son, to think about the family. I ignored them all. Then Scarlett sent me a long message saying that if I really loved her as a sister, I'd share the inheritance, that I was being selfish, that Dad probably wasn't in his right mind when he made the will. I blocked her number too. Like 2 weeks after that, I left work one Tuesday night and found my car in the parking lot with all 4 tires slashed. All 4. I called the police, filed a report, and the insurance company sent a tow truck. The officer taking my statement asked if I had any enemies or anyone who might want to hurt me, and I told them briefly about the situation with my sister and her husband. He told me they couldn't do much without proof, but to keep the report just in case. I started getting messages from unknown numbers. Threats. Things like watch yourself. They were going to make me pay for being so selfish that I didn't deserve my dad's money. I saved screenshots of everything and went back to the police. This time, the officer was more serious. Told me that with the car history and now the threatening messages, I could file for a restraining order. I told her, yes, please, yes. The process for the restraining order was exhausting. I had to go to court, present all the evidence, tell the whole story in front of a judge. I asked for the order specifically against Tyler, because even though I couldn't prove he'd slashed the tires, most of the threatening messages seemed to come from numbers associated with him or his friends. The judge granted it for 6 months initially, with the possibility of renewal. The thing is, none of this made me feel better. I'd lost my dad. I was fighting with my family. I was afraid someone was going to hurt me. I temporarily moved to a hotel because I didn't feel safe in my apartment. They didn't know I'd moved, and that gave me some peace of mind. I was in therapy twice a week trying to process all of this. One day, I got to the hotel after work, and there was a package at the front desk. For me, no return address. The receptionist told me a courier service had dropped it off. I took it up to my room and opened it carefully. Honestly, I didn't know what to expect. Inside was a notebook, like one of those normal composition notebooks. I opened it and it was like a log of all my movements over the last few weeks. Dates, times, places I'd been. Left work at 6:15 p.m., went to Target on Main Street, bought milk and cereal, returned to hotel at 7:30 p.m. Pages and pages of this. I started shaking reading it. Someone had been following me. Someone had been documenting everything I did, and they'd taken the time to write it all down and send it to me so I'd know I was being watched. I called the police immediately. 2 officers came to the hotel, took the notebook as evidence, and told me they were going to investigate. They recommended I consider moving to a different hotel, one where nobody knew I was staying. That same night, I packed a bag and went to a different hotel on the other side of town, paid cash, gave a fake name. I felt paranoid all the time, looking over my shoulder constantly, scared of every person I saw on the street. I stopped going to the gym I used to go to, started using different routes to get to work, told my boss what was happening, and he let me work from home some days. About a week after moving to the new hotel, like 3 in the morning, I got woken up by a call from the police. They told me they'd arrested Tyler. Apparently, he'd gone to my old hotel, the one he thought was still where I was staying, and tried to force his way into what had been my room. Security staff saw him on the cameras and called the police. They caught him red-handed trying to break the lock. They charged him with attempted breaking and entering, violation of the restraining order, and harassment. He spent like 2 days in jail before they released him on bail. The prosecutor assigned to my case called to tell me they were going to proceed with the charges, that with all the evidence we had, they had a solid case. She asked if I wanted to testify, and I said yes, that I'd do whatever was necessary. The trial was a disaster. Scarlett was there every day supporting Tyler, looking at me like I was the monster. My mom also went some days, sitting on their side. Ava didn't go because she was a minor. And honestly, I was glad she didn't have to see that whole circus. Tyler's lawyer tried to paint the story like I'd exaggerated everything, like I'd fabricated threats because I was resentful about what had happened years ago. But evidence was evidence. The messages were there. The notebook was there. The hotel security cameras had recorded him. They found him guilty on all charges. They gave him 18 months in prison, 3 years probation after, and a permanent restraining order that says he can't come near me or contact me ever. When they read the verdict, Scarlett started crying in court. Tyler looked at me with so much hatred. I felt a chill. But I also felt relief. For the first time in months, I felt like maybe I could breathe again. After the trial, my mom called me. She told me she was disappointed in me, that I'd destroyed the family, that because of me, Scarlett's son was going to grow up without a father for a year and a half. I didn't respond to any of that. I just told her that if she wanted to have a relationship with me someday, she had to acknowledge that none of this had been my fault, that I'd been the victim from the beginning. She hung up without saying anything else. It's been like 6 months since the trial. I moved to a new apartment, in a building with good security and a doorman, 24 hours. I'm still in therapy. I've made a lot of progress, although there are still difficult days. I used part of my dad's inheritance to catch up on all the debts I had, saved another part for the future, and donated some to an organization that helps victims of harassment and domestic violence. Ava visits me every 2 weeks. She's almost 12 now and understands more of what happened, though she still doesn't know all the details. She asked me the other day if I'm ever going to forgive Scarlett. I told her honestly that I don't know, that maybe someday, but right now I can't, and that it's okay not to have all the answers. She hugged me and told me she understood, that she just wanted me to be okay. I haven't talked to Scarlett since the trial. Sometimes I get curious about how she's doing, if she's working, how her son is, but then I remember everything that happened and the curiosity goes away. My cousin keeps me up to date on important things when I need to know them, but in general, I've made peace with having a very small family now. Basically just Ava and my cousin. Last week, I was organizing papers in my apartment and found my dad's letter again. I read it again, and this time I didn't cry. I just felt grateful that he'd understood me, that he'd seen what nobody else wanted to see. I put the letter away in a special place because I know I'm going to want to read it again in the future, especially on difficult days. And I guess that's enough for now. Moving forward day by day, building my life away from the drama and toxicity, and keeping close the people who really matter to me and who I matter to.